The faint, almost imperceptible scraping sound was the first thing that pricked Alex Ramsey's awareness, a tiny anomaly in the quiet, pre-dawn stillness of their suburban street. He was already awake, a habit born of years on the police force, his internal clock set to a perpetual state of low-level alertness. He lay beside his wife Olivia, her breathing soft, and even one hand resting protectively on the gentle curve of her 7-month pregnant belly. Through the gap in their bedroom curtains, he could see the faintest hint of gray beginning to dilute the inky blackness of the night sky. The scraping came again, furtive, metallic, like a tool being drawn awkwardly against something solid. Alex slipped out of bed, his movement's silent instinct honed by his role as chief of the city's auto safety police. He padded to the window, peering through the slit in the curtains. Their driveway was illuminated by a dim streetlight, and for a moment, he saw nothing out of the ordinary. Olivia's sensible sedan was parked where she'd left it. Then a flicker of movement near the front driver's side wheel well. A shadowy figure hunched low, almost blending into the darkness. The figure straightened, glanced around quickly, then melted back into the deeper shadows between their house and the neighbor's dense Leylandii hedge. A cold knot of unease tightened in Alex's gut. He couldn't make out any features but the size, the shape. It was unsettlingly familiar. He considered going outside investigating, but the figure was gone. Perhaps it was just a raccoon or a neighbor's cat. But the scraping sound, that hadn't been an animal. Later that morning, as Olivia prepared to leave for a routine obstetrician appointment, Alex felt that same unease resurface, stronger this time. "Hey, Liv," he said, his tone carefully casual. "Let me just give your tires a quick check before you go, and I'll top up your washer fluid." He often did these little checks, a habit born of his profession, but today it felt more urgent, driven by that shadowy figure and the inexplicable scraping. Olivia smiled, her face glowing with the serene radiance of impending motherhood. "Always my hero, Alex. What would I do without my personal safety chief?" She kissed him, a sweet, lingering gesture that always made his heart ache with a fierce, protective love. He did a walk around of her car, checking the tire pressures, peering underneath with a practiced eye. Nothing seemed obviously amiss. The brake lines visible in sections looked intact. The tires were fine. He chided himself for being overly suspicious. And yet the unease lingered, a persistent, nagging whisper at the back of his mind. As Olivia backed out of the driveway, waving cheerfully, Alex found himself watching, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. She turned onto their quiet residential street, Primrose Lane, heading towards the busier thoroughfare at the end of the block. On impulse, Alex got into his own unmarked departmental vehicle, which he often drove home, and decided to follow her for a few blocks, just to be sure. He told himself it was just protectiveness, the heightened awareness of an expectant father and a seasoned cop. Olivia approached the stop sign at the end of Primrose Lane, where it intersected with a busy 4-lane arterial road. He saw her car slow, then instead of stopping, it seemed to glide. Smoothly, too smoothly. Her brake lights weren't on. His blood ran cold. He saw her head whip around, her expression, even from this distance, one of dawning panic. Her car was rolling faster now, directly into the path of oncoming traffic. "Olivia, brake!" He roared uselessly into his own windshield. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, his own vehicle surging forward, his mind racing, calculating angles, speeds, possibilities, all of them horrific. He saw her frantically pumping the brake pedal, her silhouette rigid with terror. No response. The brakes were gone, completely. A large delivery truck was bearing down on the intersection, its horn blaring. Olivia's car was drifting helplessly into its path. There was no time. Alex wrenched his steering wheel, his tires screaming, positioning his heavier, sturdier vehicle alongside Olivia's sedan, matching her speed. "Liv, steer right into me, brace yourself," he yelled, hoping she could hear him, his voice amplified by the open window and the adrenaline coursing through him. He saw her terrified eyes meet his for a split second. She understood. She cranked her wheel. The impact was a jarring, screeching thud of metal on metal, carefully controlled on his part, just enough to deflect her car's trajectory away from the truck and towards the grassy verge on the opposite corner. Her car bumped over the curb, coming to a shuddering halt, airbags deploying with a violent hiss. His own car, damaged but still drivable, stopped beside hers. Alex was out in a second, yanking open her door. "Olivia, are you okay? The baby..." She was pale, shaking, tears streaming down her face, but conscious. Alex, the brakes. They just went. Nothing. The deployed airbag was already deflating, its acrid scent filling the car. He quickly checked her over his hands, surprisingly steady, then gently helped her out. Her legs were trembling too much to stand. He eased her down to sit on the grass, his arm around her, his heart still hammering. The truck driver, shaken but unharmed, had pulled over and was rushing towards them, phone already to his ear, calling 911. Alex looked at Olivia's car at the front wheel well, where he'd seen that shadowy figure. He knelt, peered underneath, and then he saw it. The brake line not leaking, not corroded, but cleanly, unmistakably severed. Cut with a tool. A cold, murderous rage, unlike anything he had ever experienced, rose within him. This wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder, and he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone exactly who was responsible. Ms. Eleanor Ainsworth, president of the Primrose Lane Homeowners Association. The woman who had made their lives a living hell since Olivia's pregnancy had become visible, her campaign of petty tyranny escalating with each passing month. The central question wasn't who or why, but how he was going to prove it and make her pay for nearly killing his wife and unborn child. Alex Ramsey's world revolved around the intricate dance of mechanics and safety. As chief of the city police department's auto safety division, he was a man intimately familiar with the myriad ways a vehicle could fail or be made to fail. His unit was a specialized team of investigators, mechanics, and forensic experts who probed the causes of serious traffic collisions, investigated automotive-related crimes, and promoted vehicle safety standards throughout the city. They dealt with everything from faulty manufacturing recalls and chop shops to complex accident reconstructions, and occasionally, cases where vehicles were deliberately tampered with, turned into instruments of harm. Alex was respected for his calm demeanor, his meticulous attention to detail, and his encyclopedic knowledge of all things automotive. Olivia was his anchor, his sunshine. A talented children's book illustrator, her gentle nature and quiet creativity were a soothing counterpoint to the often grim realities of Alex's job. Her pregnancy, a long hoped-for miracle after years of trying, had filled their lives with a new tender joy. They'd painted the nursery in soft yellows, and greens assembled a crib, and chosen a name, Sophie, if it was a girl, Michael, if a boy. Their small, comfortable house on Primrose Lane, which they'd bought for its quiet streets and good schools, was slowly transforming into a cozy nest for their growing family. Primrose Lane, part of the larger, more affluent Willow Creek Bluffs HOA, was on its surface a picture of suburban bliss. Well-tended gardens, children playing on sidewalks, the reassuring rhythm of ordinary life. But an undercurrent of tension, of rigidly enforced conformity, flowed beneath the surface, primarily from the self-appointed matriarch of neighborhood order, Ms. Eleanor Ainsworth. Ms. Ainsworth lived in the largest house on the street, a grand Victorian that she maintained with a fierce, almost obsessive precision. A widow in her late 60s with a ramrod posture, piercing blue eyes and silver hair always impeccably coiffed, she wielded her HOA presidency like a scepter, quick to issue pronouncements, levy fines, and quash any perceived deviation from her exacting standards. Her particular brand of tyranny was often cloaked in the language of maintaining property values or preserving community character, but it felt deeply personal to those who fell afoul of her ever-expanding list of unwritten rules. The Ramseys had first incurred Miss Ainsworth's displeasure shortly after Olivia's pregnancy became noticeable. It began subtly. Comments about the increased traffic from Olivia's frequent doctor appointments. A pointed remark about the aesthetics of the extra recycling bins filled with discarded packaging from baby furniture deliveries. Then the complaints became more direct. Olivia, in her third trimester, had taken to parking her car slightly closer to their front walkway on their own driveway to shorten the walk. This apparently was an affront to Ms. Ainsworth. The inciting incident, the first clear sign that Ms. Ainsworth's animosity was escalating beyond mere crabbiness, came in the form of an official HOA violation notice. It cited a bylaw, one Alex was sure was either brand new or had never before been enforced, prohibiting vehicles from being parked in a manner that presents an untidy aspect to the streetscape. The notice specifically mentioned Olivia's car, claiming its position on their own driveway was visually disruptive. It demanded the car be moved to the garage or the far end of the driveway and threatened fines if they did not comply. "She can't be serious," Olivia had said, her hand resting on her belly, a gesture that had become second nature. I'm parking there, so I don't have to waddle so far. It's our driveway, Alex. How can she dictate where I park on our own property? Alex, furious, had confronted Miss Ainsworth. She had been polite, icy, and utterly unyielding. The rules apply to everyone. Chief Ramsey, she'd said, her lips curved in a small, unpleasant smile. Pregnancy is not an excuse for untidiness. We must all do our part to maintain the high standards of Primrose Lane. Alex had pointed out the absurdity and discriminatory nature of the demand. The fines were eventually dropped after he threatened legal action, citing protections for pregnant individuals, but the encounter left a bitter taste. Ms. Ainsworth had been forced to back down, but her animosity towards them, and particularly towards Olivia, seemed to solidify into something harder, more malicious. It was clear she saw Olivia's pregnancy and the impending arrival of a baby, not as a joyous event, but as a future source of noise mess and disruption to her perfectly ordered world. The harassment escalated, targeting Olivia's car with a disturbing focus. One morning, Olivia found all 4 of her tires mysteriously deflated. There were no punctures, just the valve caps loosened. Another time, her car parked in their driveway was accidentally doused by Ms. Ainsworth's powerful lawn sprinklers, which seemed to have been re-aimed to drench their property. The hard water left ugly, difficult-to-remove spots all over the paintwork. Ms. Ainsworth, when questioned, had merely offered a tight-lipped apology for the malfunctioning sprinkler, had an excuse that rang hollow. Then came the incident with the nails. Olivia was about to pull out of the driveway when Alex, doing one of his now routine precautionary checks, found a scattering of sharp new roofing nails tucked neatly behind each of her rear tires. They were almost invisible against the dark asphalt, perfectly positioned to cause maximum damage. Had Olivia backed out without him noticing, she would have suffered multiple flat tires, potentially at a dangerous moment. This was a significant escalation. This wasn't just petty annoyance. This was deliberate endangerment. Alex had collected the nails, his face grim. He installed a high-definition security camera system covering their driveway and front yard. He also had a discreet conversation with a few of his officers, asking them to do occasional, unobtrusive patrols past Primrose Lane, particularly during the early morning hours. He had no concrete proof linking Ms. Ainsworth directly to these acts. She was too clever to be caught on camera, always ensuring her actions were deniable, but the pattern was undeniable. His professional instincts, honed by years of investigating accidents and crimes, screamed that she was responsible. He had also started subtly checking Olivia's car himself every morning before she left, and often when she returned. He'd look for anything out of place, any sign of tampering. It was this ingrained vigilance, born of a growing unnameable dread, that had led him to follow her that fateful morning, that had placed him in the right position, at the right horrific moment, to intervene. The midpoint twist, the discovery that shed a stark, chilling light on the possible depths of Eleanor Ainsworth's malice, came about through Alex's own dogged, off-the-books investigation into her past. Frustrated by the lack of direct evidence linking her to the harassment and driven by a desperate need to understand what could motivate such targeted vindictiveness, Alex had used his law enforcement access to delve into Ms. Ainsworth's history. What he found was deeply disturbing. 25 years earlier, in a different city, a much younger Eleanor Ainsworth, then known by her maiden name, Eleanor Thorne, had been the driver in a tragic car accident. She had run a red light, striking another vehicle. The driver of that car, a young pregnant woman, had been killed. Her unborn child had also perished. Eleanor Thorne herself had sustained only minor injuries. She had been charged with vehicular manslaughter, but through a combination of a high-powered legal team and what appeared to be some questionable procedural maneuvers, the charges were eventually reduced to reckless driving, and she had served only a short period of probation and a license suspension. She had subsequently changed her name after marrying the now-deceased Mr. Ainsworth and moved, eventually settling in Primrose Lane, burying her past. This revelation was a sickening blow to Alex. Did Eleanor Ainsworth see Olivia pregnant and happy? As a ghostly echo of the woman whose life she had taken, was her harassment a twisted, unconscious reenactment of a past trauma, a projection of her own guilt and self-loathing? Or was it something even more sinister, a conscious, malevolent desire to inflict upon Olivia the same fate she had inflicted upon another pregnant woman decades ago? Alex couldn't be sure, but the knowledge added a terrifying new dimension to Ms. Ainsworth's animosity. It suggested a capacity for profound, perhaps even pathological darkness. He also learned, through some discreet inquiries with a former HOA board member who had resigned after clashing with Ainsworth, that she had recently been trying to push through a controversial beautification plan for Primrose Lane. This plan involved removing several mature trees, including one on the parkway directly in front of the Ramseys' house, to, in her words, improve sightlines and create a more uniform streetscape. The Ramseys, along with a few other neighbors, had voiced opposition to the tree removal, valuing the shade and character the old trees provided. Ainsworth had reacted to this opposition with disproportionate anger. Could this, combined with her past trauma, have been enough to tip her over the edge into something truly monstrous? The events leading up to the brake line sabotage were marked by Ms. Ainsworth's increasing agitation. Olivia's due date was approaching. The Ramseys had hosted a small, joyful baby shower in their backyard the previous weekend. The sounds of laughter and celebration, the sight of colorful balloons and gifts, had seemed to visibly rankle Ms. Ainsworth, who had watched from her window with an expression of undisguised bitterness. She had made several snide comments to other neighbors about the disruption and the inevitable noise a baby would bring to their peaceful street. Then 2 days before the incident, Olivia's car had been vandalized again. This time, a long, deep scratch, clearly made by a key, ran the entire length of the driver's side. Alex had reported it, of course, but without witnesses or clear camera footage, Ainsworth was always careful to operate in blind spots or under the cover of darkness. It was just another incident in a string of untraceable harassments. But Alex knew, and he suspected Ainsworth knew that he knew. The psychological game between them had escalated, her provocations becoming more brazen, his vigilance more intense. He had even taken to parking his own vehicle strategically to block easy access to Olivia's car at night, a measure that had clearly infuriated Ainsworth, judging by the thunderous looks she shot their way. The night before the incident, however, he'd had to attend a late-night emergency call-out with his unit returning home well after 2 a.m. That he now realized, with a fresh wave of horror, must have been the window of opportunity Ainsworth had seized. The scene at the intersection of Primrose Lane and Oak Haven Arterial was now a blur of flashing lights and official activity. Paramedics were attending to Olivia, checking her vital signs, monitoring the baby's heartbeat with a portable fetal Doppler. Her initial terror was giving way to a dazed shock, but she was coherent, lucid. The baby miraculously seemed to be okay for now, its heartbeat strong and steady, a tiny, resilient rhythm against the backdrop of chaos. Alex, his professional demeanor firmly in place, despite the maelstrom of emotions churning within him, was already directing his auto safety unit, who had responded with remarkable speed to his urgent call. He had immediately declared Olivia's sedan a crime scene. Miles. He said to Sergeant Miles Corbin, his most trusted investigator, a man whose knowledge of vehicle mechanics rivaled his own, "I want every inch of that undercarriage photographed and swabbed. The cut on that brake line is clean precise. Looks like a small pipe cutter or very sharp snips. I want to see if we can find any tool marks, any trace evidence, fibers, skin cells, anything. Check the ground around where her car was parked in our driveway last night. The perpetrator was there in the dark early this morning. They might have dropped something, left a footprint." Corbin, his face grim, nodded. "Already on it, Chief. We'll tear it apart, figuratively speaking. You think it's her Ainsworth?" "I bet my life on it," Miles Alex said, his voice flat, cold. "But we need to prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt." While his team meticulously processed Olivia's car and the area around their driveway, Alex, after ensuring Olivia was stable and being transported to the hospital for a full checkup, accompanied by a uniformed officer for support, turned his attention to Miss Ainsworth's residence. He needed to secure any potential evidence there before she had a chance to destroy it. He obtained an expedited search warrant citing the clear and present danger and the specific articulable suspicion based on the prior harassment and the physical evidence of the severed brake line. He arrived at Miss Ainsworth's house with Corbin and 2 other officers. She answered the door, her expression one of carefully constructed surprise and concern. "Chief Ramsey, I heard there was some sort of incident. Is Olivia all right? Such a terrible intersection, that Oak Haven Arterial. I've always said we need better traffic calming measures." Her performance was flawless, sickeningly so. Alex felt a surge of revulsion. "Ms. Ainsworth," he said, his voice like ice, "we have a warrant to search your premises in connection with the attempted vehicular homicide of my wife, Olivia Ramsey, this morning. Her brake lines were deliberately cut. A flicker of something, fear, triumph, crossed her eyes before being instantly masked by outrage. Attempted homicide. Preposterous. How dare you accuse me? This is harassment, Chief Ramsey. You're abusing your position because of our minor disagreements over HOA matters. Step aside, Ms. Ainsworth, Alex commanded, his patience worn thin. The search of her house and meticulously organized garage was methodical. In a locked cabinet in the garage, tucked away behind cans of ancient paint and forgotten gardening supplies, they found a small, gleaming set of precision metal snips, the kind used for detailed craftwork or light sheet metal. On the cutting edges of the snips, almost invisible to the naked eye, were minute traces of what appeared to be brake fluid and tiny metallic shavings, consistent with copper-nickel brake tubing. Beside the snips, a pair of dark-colored gardening gloves lay neatly folded. In her pristine kitchen on a counter near the back door, they found a small, almost empty container of a powerful solvent, the kind that could be used to wipe down tools or hands to remove grease and fluid. And in her home office, tucked away in a desk drawer, they found a printed-out map of Primrose Lane with the Ramseys' house circled in red. Beside it, a handwritten list: early a.m., dark, quiet, gloves, snips. Underneath, driver's side, quick. It was a chillingly concise to-do list for murder. The climax came later that day. Alex had wanted to ensure every piece of evidence was irrefutable before making the arrest. The lab had rushed the analysis of the snips and gloves. The metallic shavings on the snips were a perfect match to the material of Olivia's brake lines. The trace brake fluid was the same type used in her vehicle, and on the inside of the gardening gloves, despite an apparent attempt to wipe them clean, they found microscopic skin cells. They would need a DNA comparison to be certain, but the circumstantial evidence was already overwhelming. Ms. Ainsworth had, in a display of breathtaking arrogance, called an emergency HOA meeting for that evening, ostensibly to discuss recent safety concerns on Primrose Lane and to propose new security measures. She clearly intended to use the meeting as a platform to deflect suspicion, perhaps even to subtly blame the Ramseys for negligent vehicle maintenance. The community hall was filled with anxious, gossiping residents. Ms. Ainsworth stood at the podium beginning her address with a solemn expression of shock and concern over the unfortunate incident that had befallen Olivia Ramsey. She was just launching into a veiled insinuation about the importance of responsible vehicle ownership when Alex Ramsey walked into the hall. He was not in uniform, but he was flanked by two uniformed city police officers and Sergeant Corbin. A hush fell over the room. Ms. Ainsworth stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she saw them. Ms. Ainsworth, Alex said, his voice clear, steady, and carrying an unmistakable weight of authority that silenced any potential interruption. Your concern for safety is noted. However, my auto safety team, in conjunction with city homicide detectives, has concluded its preliminary investigation into the incident this morning. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of the HOA members before settling back on Eleanor Ainsworth, whose face had gone deathly pale. The evidence shows unequivocally that the brake lines on Olivia Ramsey's vehicle were deliberately severed with the clear intent to cause a fatal crash. The tools used in this act, along with other incriminating evidence, including a detailed plan, were recovered from your residence, Ms. Ainsworth, pursuant to a legal search warrant. Gasps rippled through the room. Ms. Ainsworth swayed slightly, gripping the podium for support. This is a lie, a fabrication. You're trying to frame me. Her voice was shrill, cracking. Eleanor Ainsworth. Alex stated, his voice resonating with cold fury and the full authority of the law. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Olivia Ramsey and her unborn child, for aggravated assault with a deadly instrument, and for reckless endangerment. Sergeant Corbin, proceed. As Corbin stepped forward to formally handcuff her, Ms. Ainsworth collapsed, not in a faint, but in a torrent of hysterical denials and accusations. It was her fault. She was always flaunting it. The pregnancy, the noise she was going to bring. She deserved. No, I didn't. You can't prove anything. Her carefully constructed facade of icy control shattered, revealing the venomous, unhinged core beneath. The residents of Primrose Lane watched in horrified disbelief as the woman who had terrorized them with petty rules and aesthetic dictates was exposed as a would-be killer. Her motivations, a toxic brew of past trauma, obsessive control, and pure unadulterated malice. The aftermath of Eleanor Ainsworth's arrest was a slow, painful unwinding of the fear and tension that had gripped Primrose Lane. Olivia miraculously suffered no lasting physical injuries from the managed impact, and baby Sophie, for it was indeed a girl, was born healthy and screaming 3 weeks later, a beautiful, tangible symbol of hope and resilience. The emotional scars on Olivia, however, ran deep. The terror of that moment when her brakes failed, the chilling realization of Ainsworth's murderous intent, haunted her sleep for months. But with Alex's unwavering love, the support of her friends, and the overwhelming joy of holding her newborn daughter, she gradually began to heal. Eleanor Ainsworth's trial was swift and decisive. The evidence against her was irrefutable. The tools, the forensic matches, her handwritten plan, the background of escalating harassment, and the chilling revelation of her past vehicular manslaughter charge, which the prosecution successfully argued, demonstrated a pattern of disregard for human life, particularly in the context of vehicles and pregnant women. She was found guilty on all major counts and sentenced to a lengthy prison term, stripped of her assets. Her grand Victorian house eventually sold to help cover the substantial damages awarded to the Ramseys in a subsequent civil suit. The Willow Creek Bluffs. HOA was disbanded in disgrace, its reputation irrevocably tainted. A new, smaller, and far more democratic neighborhood association rose from its ashes on Primrose Lane, one founded on principles of mutual respect, genuine community, and a firm rejection of the petty tyranny that had allowed Ainsworth's darkness to fester for so long. The mature trees that Ainsworth had wanted to destroy remained, their leaves rustling in the breeze, a quiet testament to the residents' victory. Alex Ramsey continued his vital work as chief of auto safety, his personal ordeal lending an even deeper urgency to his mission. He and Olivia, with baby Sophie gurgling happily in her car seat, eventually replaced Olivia's damaged sedan. The new car was equipped with every imaginable safety feature, a small comfort, but the true safety, they knew, came not from technology, but from the vigilance and love that bound their family together and the hard-won peace that had finally settled over Primrose Lane. The shadow of Eleanor Ainsworth would linger, a dark reminder of the potential for malice that can hide beneath a placid suburban surface, but it would not, Alex vowed, ever again be allowed to eclipse the light.